How's it going, everybody? My name is Cameron White, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Astrology Report. This December will be 6 years since I started my YouTube channel, and some of you have been with me when it was first, what the heck is going on in the universe? Then it turned into, what the fuck is going on in the universe? And then at some point, I think it was in like 2020, I changed it to your favorite horoscope or something like that, your favorite weekly horoscope. Anyway, it's time for a little bit of a change. I've been having this green screen set up here for quite some time. I've been really enjoying it, and I'm really ready to kind of just take all of this to another level. So I really appreciate everyone that's been with me since, what the heck is going on, or 2020, or if you're just, this is the first time watching your video, I'm super grateful. This is the same exact show. Not much is going to be different. I'm just going to be wearing suits from now on. As well, it's just a different title change. However, a few other updates is these episodes are available on Rumble and on Odyssey. As well, now with this being the Astrology Report, this is now going to be available on Apple and Spotify podcasts. So if you're into the podcasts, go ahead and check me out over on Spotify and Apple. Leave a 5-star review. I would super appreciate it. And also what's different is I have a lapel mic now. I've been getting so many DMs and comments about getting a lapel mic. I finally got that all set up, so I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm just got to figure out what to do with my hands. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. This week, we have Mercury making a square to Jupiter. We have Mercury ingressing into Capricorn right after that. We have the full moon in Gemini on Mars, and I didn't write this here, but the full moon in Gemini, and this isn't every full moon in Gemini, but it's when the full moon happens when Mars is retrograde, is always when the sun goes opposite Mars. So it's the halfway point of this Mars retrograde. We'll be talking about that. We have Venus making a square to Jupiter, and we have Venus ingressing into Capricorn. So every single day this week has a pretty big highlight. So this is a really exciting week in my opinion. So let's get started. On Monday, we're going to be having the moon make a conjunction to Uranus and make a square to Saturn as Mercury makes a square to Jupiter. So there's kind of a lot going on here. The big thing is, I've been kind of a broken record with these moon, Uranus, Saturn things, and it's the same shit, different day essentially. Moon conjoining Uranus, there seems to be some type of disruption. There seems to be some kind of, upheaval is a good word for it. A good way to get out of something I like to, or I should say, something that I've been reframing in terms of working with astrology has been, how do I hack something, right? Like, how do I take a perceivably bad transit and make it good by doing something that would make it good? So with the moon conjoining Uranus and Taurus, the moon's in Taurus, we want to be fixated, we want to be grounded, but the moon conjoining Uranus would attest to that not happening all that well. So I think as the moon conjoins Uranus, something that I would do is try to be innovative, try to be creative, do something sporadic and different that is more aligned with my goals. Now, the only issue with that is as the moon makes this conjunction to Uranus, it's going to then immediately apply to a square with Saturn. So if you're trying to do something creative or trying to do something sporadic and you're planning on it being perfect the first time, this is going to be a massive failure. However, if you are willing to get out of your comfort zone and do something different, which is really a part of the moon in Taurus, right? The moon in Taurus is in its comfort zone, but when it has these aspects to Saturn, when it's on top of Uranus and Rahu, that doesn't come naturally. So the moon conjoining Uranus, I think, is a good day to try to test something, do something a little bit different that isn't going to be perfect the first time, that might have issues later on down the road. And I think as the moon, after it conjoins Uranus and makes the square to Saturn, there is this kind of resistance and there is this kind of, you could look at it as a setback, but you could also look at it as just not going the way that you initially thought. So if you're going to try something different and try something unique, don't expect it to work out the first time. And you might have some roadblocks that come up that challenge you or that make it more difficult to do what it is that you're doing. Now, if you're just kind of minding your own business, not really giving a fuck about much, the moon conjoining Uranus and squaring Saturn is going to kind of throw a wrench in your plans. It's going to be a little bit disruptive. So try not to, something I want to talk about is the moon's still present with Rahu right here, right? The North Node, it's this all-consuming thing, this thing that we're super hungry for, that we want to go towards. And that it's like, when you're not listening to the universe or yourself, whatever you want to call it, and you're forcing something to happen and it's just not working, you should listen to that, because that's what a lot of Monday is trying to force something to happen that may not happen exactly. Maybe take a break from it, do something else, get your mind off of it, and let your, subconscious work things out. Now, the other thing that's going on Monday is the Mercury. Mercury is going to be making a square to Jupiter. So I love this and I hate this. On my Patreon, which, if you're not familiar with my Patreon and you want to support me, I do a live monthly Ask Me Anything episode. I do a live monthly overview for the month ahead, and I do rising sign horoscopes over there too. So make sure you check those out if you want to support the channel. It really helps me out. as well as there's a Discord and everything too. But something I talked about on my month ahead was Mercury in Sagittarius making a square to Jupiter. What's important about this is Mercury is in the superior position, right? So Mercury kind of has a little bit of authority in this situation. But Mercury, plans, logistics, communication, it's in detriment. Now, that's not always bad. It's just not good for the mercurial things, right? Like, so having set plans, having clear communication. Mercury in Sagittarius is just good for, getting the gist of it, thinking larger than life. But as Mercury makes a square to Jupiter, this is kind of like, before, let's just make an analogy here. Let's say you're about to take a big leap in somewhere in your life, and it's kind of like a big leap of faith. That Mercury in Sag squaring Jupiter is like, wait, what if I don't make it? Wait, I don't have this. Wait, I don't have that. There's this, sporadic anxiety feeling of, Mercury is opposite to Jupiter. Rationale is distinctly opposite to belief and faith. Sometimes in order to have faith, you have to go out of your mind. Sometimes when, you want to have faith, you want to have a belief, it requires something that doesn't necessarily make rational sense. And so with Mercury squaring Jupiter, there's going to be this kind of hiccup of like, wait, I want to take this big leap of faith. I'm trying to be faithful. I'm trying to be trusting. I'm trying to believe, but this isn't making sense. And this is a good day to like shut that up. This might kind of trick you out a little bit, or what's the word I'm looking for? I always remember when I used to ride motocross, before you do a big jump, sometimes like that voice in your head can be like, wait, that's too big, or wait, don't do that, or wait, what if you crash? Wait, what if this happens? And you have to kind of silence that voice. You kind of have to say, I know that this is a big jump. I know that this is a big deal, but when you kind of rationalize it and overthink it, that fear gets in your way. So I look at Mercury squaring Jupiter as, this is an excellent time to test your faith and to shut up that rational voice in your head and just to allow yourself to believe. And I know this sounds corny, but like, this is the last time we're going to have Jupiter in its home sign. It's not until I believe 2025 when Jupiter gets all the way to Cancer and it's exalted, and that's going to be really, really good. But we've got some time before that happens. So when we talk about, faith, belief, abundance, expansion in your life, this is kind of our last stop that we have with it. And so I think with Mercury squaring Jupiter, I think if you overthink it, it's not going to work out for you versus I think if you just kind of let yourself believe, let yourself, not have all the rational plans, it doesn't all need to make sense, right? Something I really appreciate about, religious people is that when you talk, especially like, let's just use Christians for an example, is like, a lot of people are like, well, there's no big white man in the sky doing all that stuff. And they're like, yeah, that's not really what we believe. And that's not really what's important. And it's like super Mercury opposite Jupiter. It's like, how is this supposed to make sense? And, if God loves us all, what about this? And what about that? And it kind of just ruins it, if that makes sense. So what Mercury squaring Jupiter is good for is challenging yourself to like not have those, rational thoughts come up, because right now Mercury is not acting rationally. Right now Mercury is just like overwhelmed with the bigger picture stuff, and it doesn't have to make sense, right? You just have to kind of believe and trust it. So as we move on into Tuesday, this is when the moon is going to make a sextile to Jupiter and then ingress into Gemini. And then we get about 3 days of the moon being in Gemini for this full moon. And Mercury goes into Capricorn. I really like this week, to be honest with you guys. But when the moon is in Taurus here at these last degrees, it's going to make this awesome sextile to Jupiter, right? The moon is coming off from this square to Saturn, so there is this resistance, there is this struggle to move forward. But as the moon is still exalted, it's still in its favorite sign to be in, it makes this sextile to Jupiter where the moon in Taurus is about like nurturing and comforting and feeling stable and feeling secure. As that sextiles Jupiter, it's kind of like, this is also by the time Mercury goes into Capricorn. I know this still says Mercury's at 29, but it's going to be in Capricorn by Tuesday. But as the moon's in Taurus making the sextile to Jupiter, there's this kind of comforting feeling of like, I did that, that was possible. I do feel more secure. Jupiter's faith, Jupiter's abundance, Jupiter's hope. And the moon making a little sextile to Jupiter is like, Jupiter, in my How to Read Your Birth Chart course, I kind of talk about the difference of a sextile versus a trine. The aspects of sextile and trine are both harmonious aspects, but a trine is like, I like to think of it as like an overhand reach of like, let me help you, let me grab you, versus a sextile is like when you help a old lady up the stairs. It's kind of like, oh, let me just kind of assist you. It's nothing crazy. I'm not doing all the work for you, but I'm there if you need it. And that's this moon in Taurus sextile Jupiter in Pisces energy of like, Jupiter's kind of having this nice little assist to the moon in Taurus of feeling that security, feeling that groundedness. Now, when the moon does move into Gemini though, this is where things kind of get more intense because we are building up for the full moon in Gemini on Mars. And like I said in my monthly overview on my Patreon, a lot of this is about ripping up the plans and not necessarily starting over, but the analogy I used was, and I'm going to talk about this as we get to the full moon, of let's say you're building a house, and let's say you drew up all the plans, you did all the piping, and then you're about to lay down concrete. Well, you've already laid down the concrete and the concrete's still a little bit wet, and then your electrician or a plumber comes in and goes, shit, I didn't actually put down this one pipe that I needed to put in. And if you know anything about constructing homes, like once you lay down that concrete, it is that you're gonna, for one, piss everybody off, and it's not gonna be easy to go and fix that. But that's what a lot of this full moon in Gemini is like, there is a problem. It is not necessarily, you know, like the end of the world, but in order to fix that problem, it is going to take, you know, breaking through some concrete and kind of causing some disturbance. So as the moon goes into Gemini, I think there's a lot more mental energy, right? The moon is our emotions, our day-to-day behavior, our body and how we feel. And as it goes into Gemini, it's going to be much more sporadic. It's a little bit more chaotic. Something I like to talk about with the moon in Gemini is, you know, just sharing our emotions, sharing our feelings, communicating them with people, right? And we have about 3 days of that for this full moon. But Mercury is going to go into Capricorn. And this is really important because this full moon and the moon going into Gemini is ruled by Mercury. And Mercury is now in Capricorn. Mercury in Capricorn is very blunt, very dry, very rational, very sticking to the plan. And as Mercury goes into Capricorn, you know, a lot more rationality comes into play. We're not just thinking it with our heads in the clouds and dreaming and believing and all of that kind of stuff. Mercury in Capricorn is like, all right, if this is what I believe and this is what I want, what's the plan? How are we going to stick to this plan? How are we going to write this plan out? What is the system in which we will operate with? And Mercury is like, again, logistics, communication, being very specific, being very detailed. And so as Mercury goes into Capricorn, there is this kind of like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to go after. This is the plan. This is what I'm, you know, this is my system. But as the moon goes into Gemini, there is this, you know, angst to it almost in a sense, because we are building up for a full moon on Mars. And this is Mars retrograde, right? We're kind of realizing that the plan needs to change. The concrete's already poured and we forgot to lay down a line, and it's like, shit. This is, you know, it's not the end of the world, but it sure is going to be an issue. So we move on into Wednesday, and this is when we have the full moon in Gemini. It is going to be conjoining Mars, but more importantly, this is the sun going opposite Mars. This represents the halfway point of the Mars retrograde. And I want to give you guys some perspective here. I've said since last year that Mars is going to be in Gemini for quite some time. We had Mars ingress into Gemini in late August. Mars was in shadow by early September. And then all through September, all through October, Mars was building up for this retrograde. Then we got to about right before Halloween, Mars station retrograde. Then we had all of November with Mars retrograde. And now we're here in December, the middle of well, this is still early December, but middle of December, we're finally at the halfway point. What has been going on? I mean, if you're a Taurus rising, what's been going on with your money? If you're a Cancer rising, what's been going on with hospitals and doctors and your isolation and your subconscious and your fears? If you're a Leo rising, what's been going on with your friends? If you're a Libra rising, what's been going on with your beliefs and your spirituality or far distance travel or higher education? If you're an Aries rising, what's been going on with your car or your siblings or your neighbors or your ability to communicate with other people? We finally get to the halfway point where we realize what the issue is, right? So number one, this is the full moon. What the full moon represents is this is the moon, which is, in astrology, the luminaries are looked at as separate from the planets, of course, right? We still call them planets, but the luminary's job is just to light things up. It's just to literally illuminate and for you to see things. But the moon lights up the dark. It lights up the night. It lights up what we can't always see. It wanes, it waxes, it goes through these phases in where we see different perspectives of the same situation. And this full moon where everything is very clear, especially think about this metaphysically. The moon lights up the night and the dark, right? Think anciently. The dark in the night was looked at as like the underworld, and the full moon is lighting this up where we can see what usually isn't typically seen much more clearly. And this is happening on Mars retrograde, right? So what needs to be changed? What information have you been given? What thoughts have you been thinking that is now allowing you to realize what needs to change? Mars is energy, action, fight, conflict. And Mars retrogrades are typically looked at as malefic. They are typically looked at as bad, but this is much more of a moment of realizing what needs to change, what information is now clear that you are now having to maybe work a little bit backwards on. I think it's important that the sun is opposite Mars here, and the sun's in Sagittarius. The sun being our will and our vitality and our energy and our ego. It's in Sag. You know, we're thinking bigger, we're thinking greater, we're wanting to explore, we're wanting to expand, we have this ambition. But as it goes opposite Mars, there is this feeling of like, I want to go in a certain direction, but I can't do that until I fix this issue. And this full moon on Mars is like, I mean, all Wednesday is really about addressing the issue. What's been going on since late August, all of September, all of October, and November, and now we're finally here in December where it's time to realize what that issue is, right? And maybe you didn't know what that was at first, but there have been, you know, Mars rules fights and conflicts and problems, inflammation and stress, and it's been in one area of your life, right? And you've had these conflicts or you've had these problems come up, and now it's time to really address them. And what needs to change? What do you need to go backwards on? This might even be revealing new information. This might be showing you, hey, maybe you didn't have the right plans. For example, this is why I was using that construction analogy of it's like, you know, maybe you thought you had all your piping down before you poured concrete, and then you realized, shit, I forgot one part of it. I forgot this. I didn't know about this. I didn't know about that. And this is important because now that Mercury is in Capricorn, like we're laying down that concrete. Things are getting very serious. Mercury, the ruler of this lunation, is in Capricorn, where there's something about a system or a structure or things that are in concrete that, again, might need to change. And change isn't bad. You know, I get very frustrated with people in this, you know, that watch my shows, and not that I love you guys to death, but I think so much of the spiritual people have been so influenced by, you know, everything's supposed to be positive and everything's supposed to be great. You know, I get comments on my year ahead horoscope being like, this is depressing and this is horrible. It's like, I don't make this shit. Like I'm just Mercury here. I'm just the messenger. I don't make the hot dogs. I just sell them. Also too, it's really funny, the same people that go, oh, like I wanted this to be better. I wanted this to be great. Why aren't you more positive? Are the same people that go like, my life is always horrible. I can never change. And this is how it's always going to be. And it's like, okay, well, how can you say that life is always this negative thing, but then when you watch astrology hoping that they're going to lie to you and say that things will be better, you get upset when they're saying that, you know, things are going to be tough. Life is fucking hard. We live in the 21st century where so much of life, day-to-day life, 99% of life has been literally spoon-fed to us. You have to understand, this is an ancient tool. When this stuff was created and when this stuff was figured out, this was not when, you know, you can just go to the store and buy all of your products and buy all of the food that you need and have a beautiful roof over your head. This was a time where, you know, survival was a big part of life, and life is always going to have problems. And it's not about being negative, but understanding that no matter what you do, you can have the, you know, for example, I get a lot of people that are like, when am I going to meet, you know, my dream relationship or whatever? And it's like, you got to take that idea, you have to take those rose-colored glasses off, because guess what? No one's perfect. Now, you can see the best in people, but understand they're going to also have their problems too. And the question is, how do you handle those problems? Are you having too high of expectations to where these people don't match your expectations and then you set yourself up for failure? So I want you to look at this as a good thing. Things need to change. Things need to be different. You have to have conflict because that stress is good for you, right? Isn't that, what's that word in health? Not hypertrophy. Oh, I can't think of it. Hormesis? Yeah, hormesis? Or is it homeostasis? I think it's hormesis. I can't remember which one it is, but like, stress is good for you. It's the way that you overcome things. And when we live in a binary world of good and bad, you wouldn't have the good without the bad. And so for a lot of people, this might stress you out a little bit, but this is good. This is an opportunity to grow. This is an opportunity to do things different. This is an opportunity to see the error in your ways and fix them and change them, so you don't have to deal with this shit again later on in the future, or that when you do have to deal with this shit later on in the future, you have better tools and a better awareness of how to address these issues. So don't look at this as bad, and don't come after me about being negative and shit like that, right? That's all up to you. I know motherfuckers that have the way worse lives than you, and they're able to switch that shit into a positive reality and actually change shit. I know people that have it really, really good, and they think they have the worst life ever, and it's frustrating to say the least. So I want you guys to take this full moon, understand that some things are going to be said. It's going to be a little chaotic. It's going to be frustrating, but that's okay. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to do things differently. It's okay to, you know, have to, you know, now that you have this, you just didn't know before, right? That's Mars retrograde. It's like, you know, working with a certain set of information, working with a certain set of facts. And now that we have new set of facts, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to have a different opinion based off of new information. And that's what all of this is about. That's Friday. I want Thursday. There we go. Then by the time we get to Thursday, the moon is going to make a trine to Saturn and square Neptune and Jupiter. I love this. And I know I talk a lot of crap about Neptune, rightfully so. But the reason I love this is as the moon makes this trine to Saturn, it's very clear of what the reality is, right? the moon's in Gemini. We're getting all of this information. We had all these conversations. And as it trines Saturn, it's solidifying things. It's turning things into concrete. But as the moon squares Neptune and squares Jupiter before it goes into Cancer, there's this realization of maybe where you did have, you were operating more in a space of being too idealistic, being too, living too much in a fantasy. And it's really important to understand things aren't necessarily just good and bad, right? Like Neptune isn't just all the way bad. I know I have a lot of issues with it, but everything is good or negative depending on how you use it. And there are times in your life where idealism and hopes and dreams and visions are really good, but there's other times where that gets in your way of doing what needs to be done or doing what's going to be pragmatic and realistic. And I look at this moon in Gemini squaring Neptune and Jupiter of like, it's kind of like, damn, I really thought that. Like, damn, I really thought this was how it's going to be. I really was looking at things through this way too romantic lens. I was looking through things through this way too idealistic lens. And it's kind of a reality check here on Thursday. And now this is the moon waning, right? We're coming off from the super intense feeling to a much more calmer state. The moon's going to be in Cancer after this. We'll talk about that on Friday. But as the moon squares Neptune and Jupiter, I think this is just a good time to really ask, where was your ideal and your vision not necessarily supportive or conducive to an actual reality? And these are, again, going back to what I said a moment ago, this is all really good for getting clear on what is your truth, right? Like some people think, I hate that, I hate that saying of like, this is my lived experience or this is what my truth is. It's like, well, that's not really how it works. But, if you want a certain outcome, if you want a certain goal in life, if you want to be something, it takes those dreams and it takes that bigger vision. But you also have to understand that not everything is always going to play out that way that you've created in your head. Jupiter rules stories and narratives, and we tell ourselves these stories, right? Like, people have these negative stories of like, oh, I had X, Y, and Z experience in my life, so this is why. And so now the story I tell myself is I can never have love. I can never be in a relationship. I can never have my dream job. I always have to suffer in X, Y, and Z. And I think this is a big check of like, what stories are harming you? Like, it's okay to have certain narratives and certain stories about your life, but you have to understand, does that help you at all or does that harm you? If you're struggling making money, but you tell yourself a story of, I can't make money, well, you're not going to go anywhere fast, right? But if you tell yourself the story of, hey, I'm struggling with money right now, but that doesn't mean that I can't make money in the future. That doesn't mean I can't do any of this stuff. If you tell yourself the story that you're confident, you're creative, you're engaging, you're ambitious, and that you can overcome all obstacles, well, then you're going to make some money. So really check the stories that you're telling yourself around this time. And I think this is just a good day to kind of understand where your head was a little bit lost in the clouds and being a little bit more clear about how things are actually going to be working in the future. So as we get to Friday, Venus is going to make a square to Jupiter, and then Venus is going to be ingressing into Capricorn later on that evening. The moon will then also ingress into Cancer, and it will go opposite Mercury. So there's kind of a lot going on here. The energy really does shift this week. So let's talk a little bit about just the moon ingressing into Cancer going opposite Mercury. So as the moon goes into Cancer, right, this is also its home sign. The moon is about our bodies, our emotions, taking care of things, nurturing, protecting. And as that goes into Cancer, there is this greater feeling of wanting to protect, wanting to nurture, wanting to not necessarily withdraw, but go internally. Like how do you feel? How does your gut feel? How does your body feel? And I think as the moon goes opposite Mercury, there is this sense of like, this is what has to be done. Like these are my needs. Mercury in Capricorn is really good at explaining things very rationally. It's really good at explaining things in a very blunt tone. And for some people that kind of, puts a chip on their shoulder. But for other people, like, especially in this, spiritual astrology world, some people are just so, everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be good. Like sometimes when you're just straight to the point and you're no bullshit, you're no fluff, some people get a lot of value out of that. And I think as the moon's in Cancer going opposite Mercury, this is saying what needs to be said. Like your emotions are in check. You're like, this is exactly how I feel. Now it is opposite Mercury in Capricorn where, you have to explain how you feel on a sensitive level. But the hardest part is, the tool that we have for communicating and expressing has been this very dry, very serious tone. And so this might be very, it's like you might have to express how you feel, but it might come off kind of like in a dickish way, and it might come off in this very serious way. But at least you get to be able to say what needs to be said, right? Now, the other thing that's going on here is Venus is going to be making a square to Jupiter. I like this a lot more than Mercury squaring Jupiter. I think Mercury squaring Jupiter is good for just like a mental check. But as Venus squares Jupiter and Venus is in Sag, it's like, Venus is fun, pleasure, enjoyment, sex, love, relationships. And as she's in Sagittarius, she wants to explore, she wants to be adventurous, she wants to have hope, she wants to have faith, she wants these stories and these narratives to expand into. And as Venus squares Jupiter, there is this kind of sense of, you can want where you want to go, you can desire where you want to go, but you have to deal with what you're dealing with right here. Something I really enjoy about Pisces is like, there is no going further. Like I said this last week, or maybe the week before, of wherever you go, there you are. A lot of Jupiter in Pisces is like, okay, well, if you want to run away to this city or run away there or run away this way, all your problems are going to follow you. So why don't you handle your problems right here where you are right now? Getting in tune with your, the body, the mind, and the spirit. And I think Venus and Sag is like, I can't go where I want to go until I have this check. I can't adventure off of where I want to go until I handle the problems that I have right here. If you want to run away from everything like we talked about last week, you're going to realize that there's no running away from these issues. But this is a good day to say, you know what, before I go, before I move on, before I adventure off, let's get really clear about what the issue is and let's have this check in and handle this right here, right now. So that when you do go, you're not bringing anything with you. Venus will then enter Capricorn later on that evening. And this is like, I was already a fan of Venus in Capricorn, but last winter, I love Venus in Capricorn. Like, it's honestly now one of my favorite transits. Because Venus is all about games and fun and creativity. And if you're a creative person, you know that when you have to work within a certain set of rules or structure, like that's what makes the game fun, right? Like if it was a game of just, do whatever you want, like then it's no fun. There's no sense to it. There's no order. Venus rules Libra and Saturn is exalted here. So when you talk about relationships, it requires that sense of commitment. It requires that sense of rules and boundaries. It's the same thing with Capricorn. This is a system, and Venus in Capricorn is like, I want to have fun, but I need to have a system to do it. I need to have rules to work with. I need to have certain boundaries to enforce. And so as Venus goes into Capricorn, this is much more of a focus on like, hey, if I want to have fun, if I want to be creative, I need to have a system. I need to have a plan. And this is important because, and I talked about this on my rising sign horoscopes on my Patreon, on my monthly live overview on Patreon, that this Mercury retrograde that we're building up to at the end of December, which happens in Capricorn, is this repeat of last winter. What was going on for you in December of 2021 and January of 2022 and even February of 2022? We had a Venus retrograde in the sign of Capricorn, and Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde right where Venus stationed retrograde. So there's this kind of mental review of all of these things. It's not like the same exact thing. Venus was like a big value shift, but Mercury is a mental shift. And so as Venus goes into Capricorn, it's like we're kind of right back to where we were last winter. What do we want to apply? What do we really desire? And what is our system that is going to get us there, right? Rather than Venus and Sag is about having dreams and goals, Venus and Capricorn is like, I need to have a plan and a system. Because when you're too worried about the dreams and the goals, then you're never going to do anything. Like something I heard the other day that actually really stuck with me is like, people value thinking more than they value action. And the more that you think about this stuff and the less that you do, well, guess what? You're never going to go there. Versus if you don't really think about the dream and the goal and you just have a system that you apply, you will get there. It's just a matter of time as to when. So as Venus goes into Capricorn, I think this is an excellent time to have a shift in value towards, Venus and Sag was, I want to dream bigger, I want to have fun, I want to look at it in this big way, versus now that we have, this inspiration, now it's time to like lay down the law. Now it's time to have a plan and a system to get there. So as we get to Saturday, the moon is going to make a sextile to Uranus, and then it's going to make a trine to Neptune. So this is really the only thing that's going on Saturday. It's kind of a chill day for the most part. The only thing I do like about this is the moon in Cancer making a sextile to Uranus and Taurus is very like, the last time Uranus was in Cancer was post-war 1950s era. And they called that like the liberation of the housewife, because there was like the dishwasher, the washing machine, and that was all when Uranus was in Cancer, right? Super funny. It's like innovation and technology around, household supplies in the kitchen. And Uranus and Taurus has been this, we have Bitcoin has blown up ever since then. We have, lab-made meat. We have Beyond Burgers. We have, the grass-fed food has also been out there. We have all these new digital ways of making money. The monetary system's all types of whack and crazy. So this moon in Cancer making the sextile to Uranus is the moon's in Cancer, right? We're just focusing on again, I can't recommend enough, cleaning. Moon in Cancer's go grocery shopping. I was doing a little bit of my own study of going grocery shopping depending on the moon phase. Don't go grocery shopping when the moon's in Scorpio on the South Node. My meat got spoiled. The bananas never ripened. It was awful. The moon in Cancer, Sextiling Uranus and Taurus is like going grocery shopping. And I know this sounds like kind of corny and kind of cheesy, but I'm using this as an analogy of like the moon in Cancer is like, take care of what you need to take care of. And as that sextiles Uranus, there's that supportive of like, hey, doing something a little bit different. If you've been thinking about making a new meal or thinking about changing up your diet a little bit, like when you go to the grocery store, go, oh, I want to try this. I want to try, maybe some of this instead of, some of that, looking at your products a little bit differently. The moon will be trining Neptune though after that. And I like that because the Cancer is a lot about like nostalgia and feeling really good, right? Feeling very warm and tingly inside. And as that trines Neptune, I think there's this really big nostalgia moment on Saturday, which we could argue, is that good? Is that bad? Is that harmful? Is that helpful? I think that's up for you guys to decide. As the moon trines Neptune though, I think this will give us that rosy look at, the past. Feeling a little like, have you ever had like an ex that was horrible, they were super bad, and then you broke up, and then you look back, you're like, oh, that was actually really good. There was so much fun behind that. That's kind of like this day, so don't get too lost and too wrapped up into it, but enjoy, feeling good in any way that you can. Like, it is nice to reflect on the past and the good times. You don't always have to think about the bad times of the past. I think this is a really good time to think about the good times that were shared, or, what felt really good and what felt enjoyable. And you might be looking, because when we look at the past, we have our stories and our narratives that it's like, we can look at a past situation as this was really bad, and maybe it wasn't actually that bad, and you're just kind of like, a little like hurt about it. Same thing with, you can look at a past situation and be like, oh, that was so good, and it actually wasn't that good. That's what Saturday is really for. It's just kind of that reflection time of like, hey, was I seeing things clearly then? And, how am I seeing things now? And perspectives change, right? And so this is just kind of a day to allow yourself that space to, feel the feelings about, your rosy colored glasses on the past. But that, there's a time and space for everything, and this is the time and space for it. Don't get too lost in it. Don't don't start texting your ex, or don't start, like wishing things were different or things like that. You have to accept that the past has happened and move forward, but this is a day to at least feel some comfort in that. So then we get to Sunday. The moon is going to make a trine to Jupiter at that last degrees of Pisces. It is then going to ingress into Leo, and the sun's going to make a sextile to Saturn. Now, the sun sextile Saturn thing actually isn't really the biggest deal in the world. As the moon in Cancer makes this trine to Jupiter and Pisces, after we have that nostalgic reflection, there's a lot of hope that gets installed here, right? Like, everything is going to be okay. For a lot of you that are really freaked out about stuff right now, everything is going to be okay. You know that. When everyone here has been through some horrible shit in their life and thought nothing was ever going to be better. And then something happened in the future where everything turned out to work out in your favor. And that moon in Cancer trining Jupiter and Pisces is, I think when you feel that feeling of goodness and that richness, and sure, you're maybe looking at things through a very idealistic lens, there is this kind of hope that gets restored and this faith that gets restored that, yeah, everything is going to be okay. You have yourself, you have, whatever hope and ambition that you have whatever you have. Maybe you have a family member that's supportive. Maybe you have at least a roof over your head. I remember in my worst times, I was like, fucking thank God I have a car. I wouldn't be able to work without that. And that's super important too when it comes to Jupiter stuff and gratitude. Like, you have to be great. Like, if you want to really work on, like, if you think everything in your life is shit right now, you got to be thankful for what you have. I don't care if you're homeless. I don't care if you're like a drug addict. I don't care about what negative situation you're in. Be grateful for what you have, because that's going to turn that narrative from, well, I don't have this and this isn't working well and blah, 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 blah. Think about what you do have and literally feel that gratitude for it, right? Nothing's ever going to be perfect. And guess what? You can get the relationship of your dreams. You can make all the money that you want. You can have the job that you want, and you're still going to desire more. We are sinful creatures. We want more than we could ever want, right? Or that we could ever have. And even when you get to the place that you want to be in, you will get to that place and say, well, this isn't good enough, and I want this and I want that. Be grateful for what you have right now, because that's going to allow you the space and the energy and the hope and the mindset to work within those parameters and say, you know what? I don't desire these things. I don't need these other things, because I have everything I need right here in front of me. That's what Sunday's for. And the moon right after that goes into Leo. Then there's this sense of pride. There's this sense of like, hey, you know what? Like, I do have everything I need. Let's kill this shit. Let's go into the shit. The moon's not really making too many aspects after that. But as the moon goes into Leo, our emotions, our body are really connected to our pride, our sense of visibility, what we desire, how we want to be seen. And I think we just need this moon in Cancer transit to like really kind of get in tune with our emotions after that gnarly Mars, that full moon on Mars. And as the moon goes into Leo, everything kind of works out. You feel a lot more sense of hope. You feel a lot more sense of courage. I think courage is probably a big part of this moon in Leo transit. And the sun's going to make a sextile to Saturn. And that's not the biggest deal in the world, but the sun in Sagittarius is like, our will and our ego and our like sense of vitality is really connected to our faith, really connected to the narratives that we tell ourselves. And I think after we have this experience of kind of going through the motions and the sun sextile Saturn at the end of the week, it's kind of like, hey, I can see the bigger picture and I feel more in alignment with what needs to be done. The sun sextile Saturn is, again, Saturn is giving that little supportive of like, and Saturn's, you know, cold, hard reality. And sure, Saturn is a very malefic planet. It's the greater malefic. But the sun sextiling Saturn is kind of like, you know, sometimes having that, you know, reality check and sometimes being very clear and being humbled too. You know what I mean? It's like something that I dealt with when I was really struggling with everything in my life was like when I was just grateful for what I had. Like I humbled myself really quick because I was like, damn, I actually have it really good. Like when even though I was like, I don't have this, I don't have that, you know, when I was sleeping in my car, when I didn't make any money and I had to go sell plasma and shit like that, it was like, when I checked in, I was like, man, I got this, I have that. Like I really do have it a lot better than most people. And that reality check gave me some support to move forward with everything. And so I think that's what Sunday is really what good for. Then we get to next week. Not too much happens. Mercury will enter shadow, so we will be like now dealing with Mercury retrograde stuff. So Mercury's going to go into shadow. We realize that, and this full moon on Mars is realizing that the concrete needs to be torn up. It's not necessarily tearing up the concrete. That's what the Mercury retrograde is for. But it is realizing that that needs to happen. And as Mercury enters shadow, it's like, all right, if this needs to be torn up, what do we got to change? What do we got to do? What do we got to plan? What do we got to execute? This is creating a plan, creating a system that you will eventually change into and do over. The sun's going to square Neptune, getting a little lost in the sauce, getting a little lost in the details. Like, you know, again, if you have to tear up the concrete, it's like, okay, well, when is the electrician going to come in? When is the plumber going to come in? When can we redo this concrete? How is this all going to work? And it's going to feel a little overwhelming. But the Mercury trines Uranus, there is this innovative and creative like solution that happens. I really like the Mercury trine Uranus while Mercury's in shadow, because Mercury's going to make 3 trines to Uranus. So there's a lot of creative solutions and a lot of, you know, random, disruptive, like honestly solutions. It's a trine, right? We're talking about like, oh, well, you know, the line that we need to, you know, install underneath the concrete just so happens to be where the concrete like cuts, and you know, there's this little line where it makes it a little bit easy, so it's not that hard of a job, right? Solutions really become clear next week. So with that being said, my final thoughts, guys. I mean, again, I can't really express how thankful I am, how like it's just been really cool doing this for the past 6 years, and this to me, changing this name, going on Apple, going on Spotify, doing this as a podcast. I really like increasing what I'm doing. I really like making sure that I'm putting the greatest value out there. So, I mean, my final thoughts, I'm just talking about me. I'm super grateful for you guys and watching this, and I really hope that you get value out of this, and I really hope that you take my words, you take these experiences and how they make you feel, and you do something with them. You know, don't let just life pass you by. Do something with this time. You only have so much time here on Earth. And I think when we get to this full moon on Mars, it's realizing, hey, this is an opportunity to change. This is a door opening for things to be different. If you don't like where you're at right now, this is an excellent time to make some changes. So with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys. Make sure you like and comment and subscribe. It super helps me out with all the algorithms. If you're gonna listen on Spotify and Apple, make sure you give this a 5 stars. Make sure you give this a good rating. And with that being said, I'll see you guys next week.